Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here continuing on with our team-by-team pre-season discussions. We've got an important one up today. The West Coast Eagles just straight off their match sim versus the Richmond Tigers, and a very special guest all the way from Perth Airport today, Eliza Reilly from the Code Sports team. How are you?
Yes, g'day Swizz. I'm about to head over to Melbourne for a couple nights for some work meetings and a bit of planning for the season ahead. But yeah, obviously that means that footy and round one is very close. So definitely excited to get the season underway.
It sure is. I was just talking to my Code Sports counterpart, Al Patton, just about some ideas kicking off before the season. So always I know if I'm getting messages from Al, the season must be around the corner. And it was good to actually have some proper match sims, which you would have obviously got to witness between West Coast and Richmond the other day.
Yeah, it was certainly exciting. There was a lot of people there at Mineral Resources Park. There was a lot of people in Perth chucking sickies, I reckon, on Monday to get down and watch West Coast under new coach Andrew McQualter, who's obviously brought this new fast, sort of ferocious game style to the fore that we've seen the Tigers play to great effect in the sort of last decade. So certainly exciting to see a few sort of youngsters get their opportunity. West Coast obviously got the win against a fairly depleted Richmond side, but I think the main thing was seeing a few rookies perhaps get a bit of a go under McQualter, because we know that there was a few names missing, like McGovern, Harley Reid wasn't out there, Tim Kelly wasn't out there, so there was a few opportunities for young stars to put their hands up.
Which we love in this preseason. Had real COVID vibes, a game on a Monday. So I thought I was actually amazed how much of the crowd was out there. It was just a great size. It was great to see all the Eagles supporters and even some Tigers supporters who I guess were locals. I don't think they would have flown over to make the trip for a Monday morning match. But yeah, it's just exciting times, especially these match sims to get to see the mix of the future versus some of those senior players, and in particular for West Coast's point of view, the players that they've brought across from other clubs, Baker, Graham and Owies.
Yeah, definitely. Graham was definitely in charge of that midfield. He really anchored it, obviously, as we said, without no Tim Kelly, no Elliot Yeo, no Harley Reid in there. So he looked very good from a sort of contested inside midfielder perspective, and led from the charge with his sort of pressure and tackling around the ground as well. So it looks like he's going to have a really strong impact on this side this year. The only worry then would probably be that once those three blokes do get back, he might not be as a consistent in the midfield as he probably was on Monday, because he was sharing it with, blokes like Liam Duggan, who we're so accustomed to seeing down back. So it was a bit of a makeshift midfield that he was leading, but certainly looks like he's going to be there round one, as we sort of expected when he made the move across as a free agent. But one to definitely keep an eye on in that scratch match against North Melbourne upcoming in the next fortnight. Whereas Owies, he was fairly quiet. Didn't really notice too much of Matt Owies, if I'm totally honest. But the good thing is that he was obviously out there. He is very much in McQualter's sights for round one. And from what we've seen from the Eagles this preseason, they do want to roll with a bit of a smaller forward line and get that sort of mosquito fleet going that we've seen in the sort of prime of Richmond's premiership era. So Tyler Brockman was probably the one who had more of an impact, kicking the 3 goals, but always, sort of brought what we've come to know of him, that sort of pressure small forward role. Might not be the highest scoring when it comes to Supercoach, but it looks like he'll be firmly in the frame for round one.
From a footy perspective and a West Coast perspective, it's really good. Like, they're talking to other people about these team-by-team discussions. It's all about the depth at the moment. And I feel like the competition's so close now. If you get a couple of injuries, you're well back in the pack, where if you can have players fighting for positions, and now players like Petrocelli, who were just automatically selected in that West Coast forward line, has real competition with your likes of Brockman and Owies coming in, even Ryan and Cripps. Like, you wouldn't want to have a couple of bad games because these guys are all knocking on the door for opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone like Tyrell Dewar as well was almost took mark of the year on Monday morning, and he kicked a very nice running goal as well. He was definitely an excitement machine, and he's someone who we didn't really expect to play a whole lot of senior footy in these past 2 years, but obviously made his debut last year and is very much looking like he could be there round one as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for these smaller, sort of quicker type players. But caveat that, obviously, by saying that Jamie Cripps and Liam Ryan weren't there, who have definitely proven themselves to be starters based on the pre-seasons they've had.
Yeah, for sure. And only really Yo and Sheed missing, and even Sheed's probably dropped down the pecking order these days. So it's probably only Elliot Yo, which it's good to see that the Eagles good bill health, which does let these people, players, all push for spots with each other. Talking about players that were really impressive, that I was really impressed with was Hutchinson. I thought he patrolled the wing really well. His opportunities that he got in the midfield with some of those CBAs, I thought he was really strong in the contest, and really looked promising for this season.
Yeah, he's certainly a player who's making a really late charge in this preseason to be there. Round one, obviously a mid-season pick from last year, who was actually drafted as a sort of flying forward who could take a bit of a hanger, but can also play as sort of that third tall and be an option down forward. But the Eagles experimented with him as sort of a midfielder in that very last game last year against Geelong, and he finished up with 24 disposals and a goal. So they sort of went away in the off-season and looked at whether it was a role they could really explore. And certainly he's proven himself to be someone who's done a lot of work on his sort of endurance and running capacity. And that's why we've seen him make such a strong start to the preseason in this sort of wing role. But like you mentioned, obviously with that ability to go on ball as well. So he's someone who's definitely pushed a pretty solid case to be there round one. And he's, looking the goods to sort of be ahead of Campbell Chester when it does come to those sort of wing pecking order.
Yeah, and this is where the interest will be for this North Melbourne game now, because how sort of McQualter balances the squad, and who he kind of needs to leave out just to make it a contest between some of these positions, because there was some guy, as you said, some young fellas really impressive, and if they do play all these guys who are, to give them an opportunity to have a match before their round one kickoff for the season, yes, there's going to be some unlucky kids. Talking about the actual kids, there was one young fellow who's really impressive, particularly from a Supercoach point of view, and that's Eliza Hewitt. Originally, I had him not in the side, and then I had him as the sub, and I found a spot for him now because I just thought he was just too good on the in that practice match to kind of leave out. But the hard thing is, again, it's just another guy who's fighting for a spot.
Yeah, exactly. He's been one who his injury history has been well documented. Didn't play a single game last year due to this sort of ongoing foot injury he's been dealing with, but he's had surgery on that and has been able to have a full, basically, pre-season under his belt and tick every single box the club has asked for him. So he obviously kicked the opening goal on Monday morning in that first sort of 3 periods, and he looks like someone who's really going to take that next step as an inside midfielder this year, but also with bursts up forward, because he is so powerful. He's really strong in the hips, and when he burst onto the scene sort of 2 years ago, he often had an impact every time he got thrown forward. So he's someone who certainly looks like he's on track for round one, and is going to have a big sort of say in that midfield, but also chopping out in the forward line.
Yeah, I think he would complement Harley Reid really well in there, and I'm kind of hope that they get to play together in the next practice match, just to see how that dynamic will work.
Yeah, definitely. And Harley, we're hopeful he'll play as well. He's obviously been managing a bit of ankle soreness, but by all reports, should hopefully be available for this North Melbourne game.
Yeah, 100%. And then in regards to sort of the guy that played backline, he's probably the centerpiece of putting McQualter's game plan in for West Coast, and that's Liam Baker. I thought he played a real good role as a leader. He probably wasn't as dominant as you probably would hope, but just that you could see how he was, that leadership that was coming out from him, and the kind of direction that he was giving from half back.
Yeah, definitely. He was very much driving it, and has been one of the big sort of standard setters since he's arrived at the club over summer. But you could just see it in the way he wanted to take the game on. He was sort of charging forward and taking ground at every opportunity. He's certainly not afraid to sort of take that game on and be that sort of barometer down in that back line. And I think he's going to find a really nice home at half back for the Eagles this season.
He's the one that all Richmond supporters will say, it'll be hard watching him play elsewhere. Don't expect, 24 to 30 possessions from him on any given week. It's more the stuff he does off the ball, the way he fights for the 1%ers. It's just that real barometer player, because he will put his small frame on the line every time he goes for a contest, which, I think the Eagles fans will absolutely love watching.
Yeah, absolutely. He's someone who's definitely been an excitement machine at pre-season so far and popping up. The only thing he probably was guilty of was turning the ball over a few times to his Richmond teammates, who might have been a bit confused seeing the Tigers there on Monday, but you'd expect that very much clears up in time for round one.
Bo Allen's another rookie that I know a lot of people are kind of looking at. How did you see him settle into that first match?
Yeah, he sort of brought all the traits that he was drafted for, really. He's a big body, sort of eventually will transition into an inside midfielder, but will start off his career in that back line. And he was really clean and good under pressure, made good sort of decisions with the ball in hand. He did have a pretty interesting contest with Sam Layla, obviously the number one draft pick from Richmond, when he got him holding the ball, sort of this battle of the two first round draft picks, but Bo certainly looks like he's settled pretty well into that back line, and he's going to, once he finds his feet and gets a bit more confidence at the level, I think he's going to be a really valuable contributor down there for the Eagles. He's sort of like Ruben Jimby 2.0 in a sense, just sort of this muscular defender who can compete really well in the air, but he's probably got a slight sort of head start on Ruben when it comes to the skills and the way he uses the footy. So I think there's certainly a lot to like with Bo and what he might be able to achieve at West Coast this year.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thought I got when I was watching Bo run around. I was like, oh, it's just Jimby, another version of him. I was going to leave this question to the end, but the fact that we have brought up Jimby, do you think he could potentially be in trouble? Has there been any talk about that because of that push that's now left Layla with concussion and a jaw injury?
Yeah, it's certainly a tough one. I think it will certainly be looked at, given that there was that sort of consequence of the pretty serious injury to Sam, which was an unfortunate way for him to end his game. The only thing that could be saving grace is there isn't a whole lot of precedent for it. We probably see this sort of action of pushing players into the play quite often, but it only really gets scrutinised heavily when there is a sort of injury-based outcome. So I think it will definitely obviously get looked at after this round of match simulations is complete. And I think there is a bit of worry that he could be in a bit of trouble, but that will be obviously for the match review officer to decide.
Yeah, definitely suspensions now are becoming from outcome-based moments in games. And I know a lot of diehard football fans will be saying, well, I see that 100 times in a local footy and even on an AFL game. But I nearly feel like if it was probably any other player on that field, it nearly would have not got the same attention. But just because it was the number one pick, it definitely got a lot of media coverage over here in Melbourne, which is going to obviously then spark a lot more conversation. And yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't think it'll be too long. Probably it might even be one of those things where it's a fine, but maybe the AFL puts out a new directive going forward.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that precedent in the past of things that they want to stamp out. And I think given the way this unfolded, it unfortunately could fall into that category. And I think Ruben will have something to answer for here.
Yeah. And the biggest question I've probably got about West Coast lineup going forward is the ruck. We did see a bit of Flynn. We had the new young fella come on, and I think Archer Reeve in the ruck, and then also Bailey Williams was the incumbent for last year. Do you have any sort of clearer picture of which way they're going to go? Do you feel like it could be a bit of a ruck by committee situation, or is there one putting his hand up more than the other?
Yeah, honestly, the picture of who's going to be there in round one isn't really much clearer, to be honest. Obviously, Flynn got to start in the ruck, and he was the guy who they rolled out for the first 2 out of 3 quarters. He did cop a bit of a knock to the back and was sort of feeling it after that first quarter, and eventually after a secondary one, they decided to take him out of the game and put Bailey Williams in for that third quarter. So it looked like they were leaning towards Matt Flynn, but I thought Bailey Williams probably was slightly more impressive in terms of his obviously agility and versatility. And he's not a big boy. He's not going to be able to take it up to every single ruck in the competition. But I think he probably offers the midfield more with his follow-up work and ability to be a factor around the ground. So it is still very much up for debate who they're going to go with round one. But I think the biggest concern is Matt Flynn's fitness. We've never really seen him be able to string games together consistently. And obviously that was in his first season at West Coast and even stretching back to his time at GWS. So it's really going to be a matter of whether he can keep himself on the park, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And one last question before I let you go, because I know you've got a flight to catch. Sandy Brock, we always love a story from the SP period, and yeah, did obviously well enough in that match him in the preseason for him to earn a spot on the West Coast list. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, he's been sort of trudging away and training really hard in that sort of back line for West Coast, obviously after his time at the Suns came to a premature end, but he's certainly one that the Eagles were looking to add a bit of key defensive depth with Tom Barras obviously leaving in the offseason to join the Hawks, which sort of leaves them with Jeremy McGovern as their main man down there, with the likes of, sort of Harry Edwards, who's been there, Rhett Bazzo, who's had an interrupted preseason, but they lose any of those big boys, they're under a bit of pressure down there. So that was sort of the thinking behind getting Sandy Brock on the list. And he was in competition between him and Van Ness, who's obviously your former St Kilda product who got delisted. So they were sort of vying it out for that spot. But I think what it came down to was Brock's sort of performance on Monday, to be completely honest, because we sort of thought that Van Ness, watching him go about it at training, maybe had a slight edge over Brock. But I think Brock really put his case forward on Monday morning with a couple of strong intercept marks and his ability to set up and be a part of a back line that conceded just the 4 goals. So he obviously gets the nod and will be sort of the first called upon in the event of any injuries down there.
Yeah, no, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Eliza. Where can the good people out there find you?
Yeah, and thank you for your time. It's always great to talk about what we might be able to expect from clubs this year, but obviously codesports.com.au is the main place you can read my work. We'll be reporting on all things West Coast and Fremantle throughout the season, so they can click on it and find out who's burning down the track, as we like to say.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as always with us, like and subscribe. You can find us on Supercoach Insider 100 on Twitter, YouTube, and Spotify, and Switch26 for me directly on the old X. Eliza, thank you so much. We look forward to reading your articles from a West Coast perspective, and also Freo, I guess, coming into the season. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, community. Thanks, Eliza. See ya. Bye.